This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. We're pleased to announce that we are now selling our physical magazines directly on our website. You can browse by magazine title or search for a particular issue using the search bar. To pay us a visit, please click the link in the description. Enjoy. For more than a century, the mystery and value of the Mount Ophir golden slugs have fascinated and puzzled treasure hunters. The facts are buried deep within the old archives of Mariposa County, California. Clues waiting to be pieced together. Yet, to this day, no one has recovered those first privately minted official U.S. gold coins lost on Bear Creek in 1851. Only one disputed question remains: how many coins were lost in the tragedy? Reports range from 50 to more than 300. The county records are silent on the matter, and perhaps no one ever knew the exact number. The only man who did, the county tax collector, was drowned before he could make his accounting. Some dismiss the Mariposa lost gold as a small treasure, but closer examination shows its worth is far greater than the face value of the coins. If only 50 of the $50 gold slugs were lost, their total value in 1851 would have been $2,500. If 300 were lost, the amount would be $15,000. Yet even these figures pale beside their true worth today. By weight alone, the gold would be worth 10 times more than it was in 1851, and that is still only the beginning. These slugs, as they were called, were cast by hand in 1851. Each would fetch at least $10,000 from collectors today, perhaps more, depending on condition. Since they were never circulated, the lost coins would have been in mint condition. At such value, even a find of 30 coins could bring $300,000. And along with the slugs, an unknown amount of raw gold was lost, its quantity left to speculation. The saga begins in 1850, the year Mariposa County was organized in California's Mother Lode Country. At that time, the county was nearly 3 times its present size. 49ers were still pouring into the goldfields, and the land was a wild, unsettled frontier. No real roads existed, only trails widened over time by wagon traffic. County officers were scarce, their pay meager, and their duties irregular. The county itself was so poor that its first courthouse was nothing more than a log cabin in a small Mexican settlement on Agua Fria Creek. One of the earliest elected officials was Joseph Maher, a thin man with dark hair and a shy smile. Maher, both treasurer and tax collector, was known for his honesty and diligence. He collected property taxes throughout the scattered county and enforced the special tax levied on foreign miners. In those early years, taxes were paid mostly in raw gold. With no bank or strongbox available, Maher often buried his collections near the log cabin until they were needed for official expenditures. This practice was common at the time, until gold could be placed with a bank, exchange house, or express company. By law, Congress had authorized private assayers to coin money, and the first of these was the John L. Moffett Assaying Company at Mount Ophir, a mining camp at the base of the peak for which it was named. The U.S. assayer supervised the coinage. On February 21, 1851, the Daily Alta Californian reported, hexagonal $50 gold pieces manufactured under the supervision of the U.S. assayer were issued yesterday by the Moffett Mint at Mount Ophir. One side of each slug bore an eagle in the center, with United States of America inscribed around the edge, along with the gold content and 50 dolls. The reverse carried radiating lines with $50 stamped in the center and John L. Moffett along the edge. Thus began the legend of the lost Mount Ophir slugs, coins of immense historical and monetary value, scattered in tragedy and never yet found. These coins, commonly called slugs, were legal tender backed by the U.S. government. The Mount Ophir Mint did not produce many of them, since other assayers in San Francisco, Sacramento, and elsewhere were also authorized to cast gold coinage. When gold output in the region declined, the Mount Ophir Mint closed its doors. Because so few were ever struck, and because the Moffett Mint at Mount Ophir was the first officially commissioned in California, The coins are today considered extraordinarily rare. Their rarity, combined with their historical significance, makes them worth far more than their face value. On the bright morning of December 11th, 1851, Treasurer Joseph F. Maher unearthed the county's cached tax gold and packed it into a pair of leather saddlebags, locked tight. Riding to the Moffett Mint at Mount Ophir, he exchanged the raw gold for newly cast $50 slugs. Each coin was 24 carats fine, weighing 2½ troy ounces. Depending on the number of coins received, Maher's load could have weighed close to 40 pounds, a burden still easily manageable for his sturdy bay horse. After leaving Mount Ophir, Maher took a roundabout route to collect additional taxes. Several men saw him ride off into the Sierra foothills that afternoon. From there, his trail grew uncertain. No one knew exactly where he camped that night, though many believed he took shelter in the timber off the trail. He was expected back at Agua Fria the following day, but he never arrived. When Maher was 2 or 3 days overdue, word reached Agua Fria that he had departed the mint on schedule. Alarmed, county officials feared he had fallen victim to highwaymen. The sheriff quickly organized a posse to search for him. Along the way, they encountered 2 miners who reported seeing Maher alive on the morning of December 12th. He had told them he was still collecting taxes, but with a storm brewing, might head toward Lewis General Store on the La Grande Road. Those 2 miners were the last to speak with him. By midday, the storm broke, unleashing one of the violent flash floods so common in the Mother Lode country. A dozen steep canyons poured raging torrents into the streams, sending a wall of water roaring down Bear Creek. By the time the posse reached the ford, the waters had already begun to subside. The sheriff concluded that Maher had likely attempted to cross during the flood in order to reach Agua Fria. Dividing the party, the searchers scoured both banks of the creek. A mile downstream, they found Maher's bay horse lodged against a gravel bar. The saddlebags were still strapped in place, locked, but completely empty. 2 miles farther along, Maher's body was discovered tangled in driftwood. There was no evidence of foul play. Maher carried no gun and would not have resisted robbers, so killing him to steal the gold seemed unnecessary. His body was returned to Agua Fria for burial. Yet the loss of so much county tax gold left officials deeply shaken. At first, the truth of the matter was concealed from the public. Special deputies were quietly dispatched back to Bear Creek, where they searched the stream bed and both approaches to the crossing. The water had fallen to a shallow depth, but despite the careful search, no trace of the missing gold was ever found. The trail wound through a harsh country of blackish-gray shale, scattered in jagged piles both large and small. Cracks, crevices, and holes riddled the rock, while narrow canyons and sheer-walled defiles pressed against the north side of Bear Creek. Some later theorized that when Treasurer Maher came upon the creek in deadly flood, he may have hidden the gold rather than attempt a dangerous crossing. He was known to be carrying far more than he had received at the Mount Ophir Mint. Tax collections gathered along the way. Without a shovel or proper digging tools, he might easily have cached the treasure in a natural crevice, concealing it with loose stones. When the loss of Maher's gold was finally admitted, the worst fears of county officials came true. Swarms of restless men and opportunists descended on Bear Creek. They scoured the canyon walls, probed the stream bed, and pried into every crack of the shale, but they found nothing, not a single mountain. Ophir slug ever entered circulation. Investigators later confirmed this beyond doubt. The mold used to strike Maher's coins had been brand new and carried a small flaw. Soon after, it was destroyed. The only coins ever made from that mold were the ones Maher carried to his death. As the decades passed, the gold camps dwindled, mines played out, and towns turned to ghost settlements. Yet the story of Maher's lost hoard never faded. It was retold in saloons, in boarding houses, and around campfires, growing with each generation into legend. In 1890, excitement briefly flared when an elderly Mexican at Hornitos, near Agua Fria, was discovered with what appeared to be an identical Mount Ophir slug. On closer inspection, however, it proved to be nothing but brass, a test piece from the same flawed mold, later plated with gold. He had obtained it years earlier from a workman at the Moffat Mint before coinage ceased altogether. The tale lived on into the new century. In the spring of 1905, a wandering prospector named Lemuel Lem Moir, a lifelong bachelor and seasoned gold seeker, crossed paths in Sacramento with an aged, consumptive drifter known only as Squeaky. For decades, Squeaky had haunted the fading gold towns of the Motherlode, moving from saloon to saloon. He rarely spoke, never begged, and seemed strangely tied to the country's dying mining camps. Believing the mountain air might improve the old man's failing health, Lem brought Squeaky back to his camp along a tributary of the Feather River. At first, the old drifter was too weak to do much, but within weeks he managed camp chores, and soon he even joined Lem at the creek with an old gold pan. The two men never struck it rich, but Squeaky managed to pull a few dollars worth of dust from the stream each day. One night as they sat by the fire, Squeaky broke his silence. In a rambling way, he spoke of knowing where a fortune lay buried in Mariposa County. Lem, comfortable in his chair and puffing on his pipe, let the old man ramble without pressing him for details. Later, he would regret that decision. For hidden in Squeaky's disjointed words were fragments, clues, that pointed directly to Maher's long-lost hoard. By July, Squeaky's health worsened sharply. He could no longer work, and at last he took to his bunk for good. Lem cared for him as best he could, knowing the end was near. One late afternoon, before Lem had even set about cooking supper, the old man summoned him with a hoarse, weakening voice. "I won't see the sun again," Squeaky whispered. "There's a map to the gold in my poke. It's the Mariposa gold and some dust. But you got to be careful. The county claims it. They'll grab it from you. That's why I never brought it out long ago." A cup of hot coffee revived him enough to say more before the night was through. According to Squeaky's dying confession, he had once been a member of the posse that searched Bear Creek after Treasurer Maher's disappearance. At some point, he claimed, he had returned to the canyon alone. Poking about the shale piles and crevices near the trail, he stumbled upon the very place where Maher had supposedly cached the gold before attempting the flooded crossing. Excited beyond measure, he began to recover the treasure. But Squeaky was never a man of foresight. Rather than leave the region quietly with his newfound fortune, he lingered. Broke all his life, he could not resist testing his luck by spending some of the mount. Ophir slugs, that was his undoing. After drinking too heavily in a log house saloon at Agua Fria, his sudden wealth aroused suspicion. Only days before, he had been penniless. Now, he was flashing gold. Confronted by the sheriff, Squeaky claimed he had panned the dust during a brief absence. At first, the story almost held. Then, acting on a hunch, the sheriff ordered him searched. From his pocket emerged a telltale Mount Ophir slug, one of Maher's coins, stamped from the flawed mold. Accused of squandering county tax money, Squeaky was jailed. For 6 months, he endured harsh questioning, even threats of lynching unless he revealed the location of the hoard. Still, he never confessed, insisting the coin had been found in the sands of Bear Creek. At last, with no proof against him, he was released, but warned never to show his face in Mariposa County again, on pain of the noose. Years later, he tried to return. By then, the country had changed. Roads had shifted, new settlements had sprung up, and the landmarks he remembered were gone. He could not even locate the ford where Maher had drowned, much less the exact place where he claimed to have hidden the treasure. "You could look right into the cracks of the rocks and never see it," he told Lem in a rasping whisper. These were his final words of substance. That night he grew weaker. Twice Lem rose to tend him, but by morning Squeaky lay dead in his bunk, eyes fixed on the cabin's shake roof. Among his few possessions was a worn poke containing 2 quartz fragments flecked with gold, and a scrap of wrapping paper tied with string. When unrolled, it revealed a crude map. Bear Creek sketched with the old ford, a road, and 10 piles of rock. An X marked a glade behind one of the piles, where Squeaky claimed the hoard lay hidden. The paper was frayed and torn from years of being carried, but the intent was clear. River prospectors helped Lem bury the old man. He told them nothing of Squeaky's story. For years he had heard rumors of Mariposa County's lost gold, but he neither believed nor denied them. In Squeaky's case, he reasoned that if the man had ever truly known the spot, he would have retrieved it during his long years of poverty. That winter back in Sacramento, Lem read a newspaper article recounting the death of Treasurer Maher, the Mat Ophir Mint, and the county's lost fortune. Intrigued, he dug into the state library's archives. There he found old accounts describing the drowned treasurer and the vanished hoard. Speculation abounded as to what had become of it. Surely, Lem thought, if Squeaky had really discovered it, someone else must have as well, long before. Still, the old man's story gnawed at him. When spring of 1906 came, instead of returning to his usual haunts along the Feather River, Lem loaded his mule and rode to Mariposa County. At the county seat, he asked cautious questions, but none of the elders remembered anything of the long-lost gold. With Squeaky's crude, doubtful map as his only guide, Lem set out for Bear Creek. He camped and searched along both banks, moving often, studying every upheaval of rock. The country was littered with shale piles, deceptive and unyielding. The only good road in the area now crossed the creek on a bridge nearly 3 miles from the old ford where Maher had drowned. If the hoard still existed, it lay hidden among those barren rock piles, untouched since 1851. On the lower bank of Bear Creek, Lem Moore discovered what appeared to be an old dugway, long overgrown with brush and timber. Careful inspection convinced him that a road had once passed through here. Following the faint traces, he searched piles of shale for 2 miles. Only one heap matched the description on Squeaky's crude map, a dome-shaped mass of gray rock standing near the line of the old road, half a mile from the ford where Maher had drowned. Behind it lay a small flat space choked with fallen sheets of shale. The spot hardly seemed promising, but Lem decided to investigate it thoroughly before abandoning his search. He camped in the timber nearby and began probing the cracks and crevices with a 12-foot pole, sharpened at one end. The work was slow. Over the first week, he cleared only 3 fissures, disturbing rats, squirrels, and even rattlesnakes. Progress was painfully limited. Frustrated, Lem hit on a faster method: fire. The crevices were choked with years of pack rat debris, leaves, twigs, and damp earth. By setting fires and stirring them with his pole, he could burn down into the cracks and clear them to the stone bottoms. The method worked and his search quickened. After 3 weeks, he had explored most of the likely crevices. Then he turned his attention to the dome-shaped rock itself. A split ran through its center, 10 inches wide and 9 feet long. 2 full days were required to burn the debris down to damp earth at the bottom. Using a tomato can fastened to his pole as a crude baler, Lem began lifting out the black residue. The work was exhausting, but soon his efforts were rewarded. First came rotted scraps of tightly woven canvas, the kind used for small sacks of gold dust and coins. Then the next morning, while baling dirt from the crack, he saw something glinting. 4 pea-sized gold nuggets washed out in his pan. Encouraged, he raked deeper into the fissure. Then, on a morning when the sun angled into the crevice, Lem gasped aloud. There, lying plain as day in the shadows, were hexagonal gold slugs, the long-lost Mat Ophir coins. Raking carefully, he brought a dozen or more into view, scattered among bits of decayed canvas. At last, it seemed, he had found the Mariposa treasure. But the fissure was narrow and bailing it coin by coin would take weeks. Lem resolved on a quicker method: blasting. He rode into Mariposa for drills, hammers, and dynamite. There he encountered an old acquaintance, A.D. Frenchy Duché, but kept his secret for the moment. Back at the site, Lem single-handedly drilled 6 holes into the dome of shale, tamped them with dynamite, and prepared his charges. The next morning he lit the fuse and retreated. The blast thundered through the canyon, but the shale, unlike solid rock, shattered into thousands of fragments. The explosion tore the dome apart and obliterated the fissure. When Lem regained consciousness hours later, his body was bruised and broken by flying stone. 3 ribs were fractured, his head was bloodied, and his equipment destroyed. Staggering to the shattered site, he clawed through the rubble with bare hands, searching desperately for the golden slugs. But the crevice was gone. The treasure had vanished with the blast. 2 days later, Lem was found half delirious on the outskirts of Mariposa, barely conscious on his horse. Taken to a doctor, he lingered for weeks, drifting in and out of coherence. His only clear words were, "Frenchy Duché," repeated over and over. Frenchy carried him to his home in Lagrange, where his wife and sons nursed him. Lem never fully recovered. In rare lucid moments, he described fragments of his discovery, but he could not recall the precise location. In October 1906, Lem Moore died. His grave, unmarked, lies lost today in the abandoned cemetery below Lagrange. Frenchy and his sons searched Bear Creek twice, but they never found the site of Lem's blasted dome. Without exact details, the place could not be identified, and so the Mount Ophir golden slugs remain hidden. Somewhere along the shale-strewn banks of Bear Creek lies Maher's lost tax gold, secure as the day it vanished in 1851. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.